BYL Nation, we don't do this nearly enough, but we are here with the playoffs preview podcast for you. It's an exciting week in BYL Nation. We just announced the launch of two brand new locations in Marlborough, Mass, at Four Kicks, and then in Berlin, Connecticut, at the Co-op Vale Sports Center. Both of those are set to tip off in less than 50 days here for our fall sessions on September 22nd. But our focus for this podcast is on our two existing locations, BYL South and BYL North. This episode is going to be focused on BYL South, where games are played at our Dana Barros Basketball Club location. Playoffs are tipping off tonight for all divisions. So we have our collegiate championship, we have our legacy division quarterfinals, and we have a hybrid quarterfinals for our elite division as well, where the top two seeds will play it out for the top seed, and then the bottom four seeds are in elimination games to make it to the semifinals next week. So we're going to break down each one of those brackets, who's playing who your I don't even know if you call me commissioner anymore or if that's Kenny, but who I foresee moving on after tonight's games. So let's go ahead and dive into it. What we're going to do is take a look here at our bracket. Let me go ahead and get this in present mode for those who are watching. Again, this is our summer 2024 Southern Conference playoffs preview. And we're going to kick it off with our collegiate division. So collegiate division, this is a special one for us. We get to throw it once a year, every summer. We had this year, as you can see on the screen, we had 6 schools and then 2 mixed teams join for an 8-team field of all collegiate, active collegiate players, or maybe some recently graduated guys sneaking in there. We're not going to get into eligibility and COVID eligibility and all of that, but we had 8 highly competitive teams. There was nobody this summer who was a pushover. You look at a UMass Boston team that was very competitive, and they were your 8 seed. So that tells you all you need to know about the collegiate division that we had going on here this summer. But we have advanced. Theirs is a little bit shorter of a season. Guys got to get back to school. But we had here our Elite 8 and Final 4 have already played. So tonight is the championship. Western New England, their first time in the BYL Collegiate Division, versus UMass Dartmouth, who played with us last summer as well. So both of these schools in search of their first BYL Collegiate Division championship. And let's break down the paths that they took to get here. Neither one of these were a top 2 seed. So they both knocked off the top 2 seeds here. You can see UMass Dartmouth snuck in at 3-2 at the 3 seed, following a very big win in the collegiate versus elite crossover challenge. I think they blew the doors off of the Generals by, I got to do some quick math here. I think it was a 57-point victory, and that spearheaded their playoff run that they're on right now. So they almost didn't make it here, right? The very first game, their Elite 8 matchup was a rematch against Wheaton. They snuck out of there with a 74-73 win. Wheaton, one of the biggest surprises for me this summer. I knew that they were the NEWMAC champions, but we had a very competitive field here. And man, those guys are scrappy, really good guard play. And they gave UMass Dartmouth all they could handle. But UMass Dartmouth came out with the victory, then went on to face Champ City, who was the champions of our very first session of the BYL Collegiate Division. They I think they lost in the Final Four in a very close matchup last year as well. So this was the 2 seed here. Champ City had a star-studded backcourt with Curtis Henderson and Taquan Williams, but UMass Dartmouth was just too much to handle. They ended up beating them by 13 points. They had the 3-ball rolling. They're led by Josh Lopes and John Marcial. Those have really been their standout guys this summer. But then you saw the big men getting in on the action, specifically Ryan Flauto, really just could not be handled on the offensive glass. And that was their path here to the championship tonight. The other team, which probably took a lot of people by surprise, I have the receipts recorded on this computer. I had some technical difficulties in getting my preseason pod out and released, but I called Western New England as my dark horse here. Very good program. They've had a lot of success in recent years, and my preseason MVP pick, which is looking like a really good one right now, was Jake Harrison. Now I'm hoping that I'm not putting too much bulletin board material out there for him or against him tonight, or putting a target on his back. But been a fan of Jake Harrison's for a long time. He is the standout for this squad. On the season, he's averaging something like 16 points per game, maybe 9 rebounds, 7 assists, or something like that. Just a really well-rounded player, stat stuffer. It takes really good shots, high IQ type of guy, and that's really how the whole team plays. So when you take a look at this squad, they're not the highest scoring or most high octane offense. They're not going to, fill it up with a whole ton of highlights like you might see from some of the shiftier guards out there. But man, do they know how to play really clean, high IQ basketball. And their path here, they lost in the collegiate in the crossover challenge to Soul Social. So tough loss heading into the playoffs here. But in the first round, they came up against our runner-up, which is really a good matchup against Regis. And that's when they set the tone. They set the tone pretty quickly here. They took care of Regis by 20 points. And that is not a slouch Regis team. Now, were they missing Cam Wilkins and Zach Latifi from last year's squad? For sure. Having that veteran leadership in your backcourt is always going to help. But this is still a team led by Russell Rao, bringing back, Tate Pike, Dan Grasso, guys who have been on those squads for the past 2 years. And who have been to a championship together. And not only did they roll them by 20 points, but they held them to 54 points, right? And that's really tough to do in a 40-minute game, even with running clock. So they set the tone there, and then they came up against the CBFW, who was the #1 overall seed with a ton of athletic freaks across their roster, and they rolled them up too. They beat them by 16 points. They held them to 43 points. Right? I didn't have time to sit here and do the math and see what CBFW averaged on the season, but I can tell you it was a lot higher than 43 points. But this team plays really gritty defense. They talk, they're actively communicating all the time, and they're unselfish on the offensive side of the ball. So they've got a ton of momentum coming into this championship game. So when we look at the championship game here tonight, these two teams did face off earlier in the season. The result of that game does not bode well for the Corsairs and UMass Dartmouth because that was a week 2 matchup where Western New England, quite frankly, blew the doors off of UMass Dartmouth. They beat them by 28 points, 53-81. You see a recurring theme here of them holding teams below 60 points. That's what they did to UMass Dartmouth the first time that they played. I believe that UMass Dartmouth is going to show up much stronger than they did in week 2. They're a much better team. I think that game was a bit of a fluke, to be honest. More so on their behalf, not saying that Western New England's performance there was a fluke, but more so UMass Dartmouth is just better than that. You've got Josh Lopes, you've got Trent Santos in that backcourt, and then you've got a shooter like John Marcial. You've got 2 6'10", 6'11" big men in Ryan Flauto and Camden Dunbury. You've got just a ton of talent up and down that roster. Even the newcomers, I've been really impressed with what I've seen from incoming freshman Camden DiChiara. So it's a really good team here for UMass Dartmouth. But my pick is Western New England. So I'm just getting the same vibes that I got last year when we saw the Bridgewater State underclassmen team get super hot once it came time for the playoffs and rattled off a bunch of double-digit victories. Now, they had to scrap to win that championship game. And that's what I'm expecting here tonight, is that it will be a dogfight between these two teams. But I think that Western New England is the hotter of the two teams. And I think that they have the best player, with all due respect to John Marcial and Josh Lopes, who are tremendous players and probably in contention for all league performers. But I think Jake Harrison is the best player on the court tonight, and I think he's going to lead that team to victory. So let's get your popcorn ready. Come out for the 8 o'clock tip off at the Dana Barros Basketball Club. That will be some high level basketball here for the summer, and I think it's an off day from Olympic basketball, so you got nothing else to be watching in the evening. Come on out and check out our championship matchup here. See who walks away with the trophy. So that will put a bow on our collegiate division for the summer of 2024. But we've got a lot more basketball. So we're going to shift our attention here to the elite division now, the elite South division, we should say. And again, theirs is a hybrid tomorrow. So it is technically quarterfinals, but as you'll notice here, as it currently stands, Team United and Nighthawks get a bye. We're not going to make teams sit a week in between matchups and give other guys an unfair advantage here. So what's going to happen is Team United and Nighthawks will face off. They just faced off last week in what was a thriller, a very close matchup. I think that was I'm a double check over here, but I think that was a 1-point game. Yeah, Team United won 87-86. So they'll play again in a rubber match to see who ultimately can walk out of here with that #1 seed heading into next week. So probably should have put an asterisk here in this graphic, because it might look like Nighthawks #1, Team United #2. But in any case, those two teams are automatically on to the semifinals. It's about who they're going to play. And we'll start with our 3-6 matchup over here. And that is our two-time reigning champion, Top Geekers. Or is it just reigning champions? I'm kind of drawing a blank here, but our reigning champion, at least, Top Geekers. I think there might have been an upset in between there. Yeah, no, I think they won in the fall and then they won in the spring, but Hoop Academy took them out in the winter. So they've been to 3 straight championships, Top Geekers, and I think they're going to get there again. The Generals have had a tough season. They've had a lot of departures, and that's been a recurring theme across BYL, specifically in elite. Elite guys, you just got to do better, take it more seriously. I know that there's other leagues out there, other runs that we're committing to, but if you make the commitment, don't bail out on your teammates. That's real corny. In any case, we've got the Generals. They're led by Shandon Brown. They also have Ray Matthews returning, and then they've got a big man, Connor O'Brien, and Luciano da Gama, who I believe comes off the bench for them, but is a really scrappy defender. Their pickups or replacements have been Clayton McLaren and Jalen Lee, who were high level role guys for them. Really impressed with what we saw from Clayton McLaren. Started off this summer playing for UMass Boston in the collegiate division, who he actively plays for in the season, and then was picked up here as an injury replacement. But you'll note, the Generals were supposed to have Chauncey Cheek. They're supposed to have Jonathan Torres. Did have those guys on roster, but neither one's able to complete the season. So I think there's just been a little bit too much turmoil for the Generals, and they're going to run into a team that is probably the most talented that we have, even though they've slipped to the 3rd seed. I think that's more so a symptom of attendance in not having their full squad showing up week in and week out. But when you look at the Top Geekers, I mean, they bring back a core of Aaron Calixte, arguably the best point guard in the division. Maybe that's not arguable. He's definitely the most decorated that we have. Then you've got Kwame Lee, who's probably the best big man, 6'9", lefty, can shoot it, can score in the post. And then around them, you've got Kalen Dos Santos, who is just a knockdown shooter, is not going to try to do too much, kind of plays a Klay Thompson-ish role. Klay Thompson from many seasons ago, not the most recent version of him, but plays that role for them. And then they were able to pick up off waivers. They lost their second rounder, who I'm actually drawing a blank on who that was. Lost their second rounder, and they were able to fill him with Terrell Williams, who is a high flying, another lefty. He's a 6'3", probably is more. He's more of a wing, but can play that four ball or four man for you. Just depending on where you slot him. You've also got George Phil-Saim, and I think the X factor for them, provided that he shows up, is Mike Resnick, because he might be the best scorer on the team. He's really smooth with it. He can get it at the basket. He gets up, deceptively so. But his best asset is probably his shooting. They feed him consistently and get him and Calixte rolling with what you're going to get from Kwame Lee, who I don't see the Generals having anybody to really slow him. I guess Connor O'Brien, is a big enough body, but that's going to be a tough matchup for Connor, if we're being realistic, to match up with Kwame Lee for 40 minutes. So taking a look at things when these teams played last time, the results, this was in week 7. The result actually was the Generals coming out on top. So we have to dig in there and see, were the top kickers missing players, or do the Generals just pose a mismatch for them? And maybe it's more the latter. You do have the advantage, I would say, for the Generals is their guard play. So you've got Shandon Brown, you've got Ray Matthews. Now you're going to add in Clayton McLaren to that mix. If you can get, if you can pull Kwame Lee out to have to guard one of those guys, if you can pull George Phil-Saim out to guard one of those guys, you might be able to generate enough mismatches to keep it competitive. But I fully expect top kickers to move on out of that matchup. Moving over to the 4-5 matchup, we've got New Human, we've got So Social. Here's another team in New Human that's just been decimated by guys not fulfilling their commitment for one reason or another. I think they've been hammered by a lot of injuries. But New Human was supposed to have a tandem of Jabari Nurse and Chris Clark. I know Nurse is out. I'm not sure if Clark is recovered. Both of them, I believe, had injuries at some point. Nurse is heading back to school. They have picked up Arinze Obiora returning to New Human. So there's definitely an upgrade for them. Just some more veteran experience, a guy who knows how to play with Captain Michael Suarez. So that core of Captain Michael Suarez, who is, sort of like the BYL, Domantas Sabonis, and you've got Arinze Obiora, who's a former MVP candidate. When he's locked in, can fill up every stat column imaginable in the box score, and then who I think is a real difference maker for them. Haven't really clued in too much into statistically how he's performing, but I've watched him enough in the collegiate division the past 2 summers to know what a dog he is, and Cameron Wilkins. And he was exactly what they needed. He was a waiver addition, but they did not have a true elite level. And I mean, this is no shade to anybody else who's on the roster, but somebody who could full-time handle point guard duties for a New Human. And that's been their Achilles heel for quite a few sessions now. Suarez, that's my guy. I mean, he's our sponsor. He's got the patch on the jerseys. My biggest critique of his drafting is that he likes to prioritize going for wings, 2s and 3s and stretch 4s. And he's got a good eye for talent on that side of the ball, but does not draft point guards well, or sometimes at all, with the exception of the sessions that he had, Mikey Rodriguez, which, you're not going to get a Mikey every single session. So when he doesn't have Mikey, he doesn't draft point guards well. And he came into this session, in my book, ranked 5th or 6th amongst teams, just because of that lack of a point guard and somebody who could really, set the table and run the offense. Ken Wilkins was, a breath of fresh air, but amongst the other roster turmoil that they've had, they just haven't seen the success translate. But we'll see with a full squad, like I said, that's going to be one of the most formidable front courts that you're going to see in the league. Obiora, and Suarez. Then you've got Cam Wilkins running the show. They're just going to need somebody to stretch the floor. That's another area where I see New Human consistently lacking, which is shooters. So can Bryce Boggs knock down the three ball? Can MJ Lester knock down some three balls? Even Bumi Yusufu coming off the bench and Bryson Andrews, they're going to need those guys, not to ISO score. They're going to need those guys to spread the floor, to create those attacking lanes for Wilkins, and then also for Obiora as well, and then just keep the lane from being clogged for Michael Suarez, so he can operate out of the post a little bit, because that's where he does his most damage. So New Human has a lot of potential, but my dark horse for elite this session was Soul Social. Now you'll notice they came in second to last, and they've had some bumps in the road, but a lot of close losses. Lost week 1 by 5 to Top Geekers, might have been an overtime game. Lost week 2 by 4 to the Generals, might have been an overtime game. They came out in week 4. Week 3, I believe, was a forfeit, but then in week 4, they lost by 5 in overtime to the Nighthawks. So you see, the recurring theme. Oh, and look at this, week 6, they go and they lose by 1 point to Team United. So those are 4 losses decided by 5 or less points. Those easily could, 2 of those, you just take half of those and chalk them up to wins. That puts them at 4-3. And that probably means that they're sitting up, hovering somewhere around Top Geekers and Nighthawks. Maybe even, if they would have beat Nighthawks in one of those games, maybe that makes them even get a bye and come in as the 2 seed into that plan. So I'm very high on Soul Social. I think Michael Downing did a tremendous job in building a team. I think other than Top Geekers, I like the cohesion of his roster the best. And for those who are unfamiliar with it, he's got, just taking a look at their roster, obviously Michael Downing, I don't know if he'll like this comparison, and a lot of people would think this is throwing shade. To me, his impact on the court, none of the antics or theatrics, but his impact on the court is very Draymond Green. He's a tremendous defender. He's scrappy. He's a great rebounder for somebody who's really only 6 foot, maybe 6'1", and he's an amazing passer as well. So he really has that sort of offensively unifying and defensively disruptive impact that a Draymond Green does on a team. But he drafted Precious Oko, who, if they can go on a playoff run, he's probably a shoe-in for MVP, because I think he's leading the league in scoring, but he also fills it up with rebounds and assists as well. And Reed Newman, who has been a revelation. I don't think a lot of the captains knew who he is. He plays at Clark University, 6'6", can shoot it, can back his defender down and give you a little bit of that Dirk post action as well. So he's really good. I don't know how often Tyler Murray's been showing up. Any of the games that I've seen, he hasn't been there, but that's another 6'5" wing that can go. And then who I think is the best role player in the league, or at least my favorite, is Rashawn Jones, because he's a stretch 4 who has to shoot it at like a 45% clip from 3, or at least has the potential to do that, but just seemingly always makes the right play. And even as somebody who, from like an athletic standpoint, is not going to jump off the paper at you, or maybe a better way to put that, I guess, is you're not going to watch him play defense and think, wow, this guy's a lockdown defender. And he's probably not, right? But he knows where to be. He's an exceptionally high IQ guy, and he ends up being very disruptive on that side of the ball when he's locked in. So I'm just a huge fan of Rashawn Jones, but especially with that 3 ball. I mean, you're not going to find a better stretch 4 in elite than him. So that combination there, those weapons, even if you don't get Murray coming out, but if you've got Precious, who's going to be high volume, and we know that he's going to go out there and probably get his 30. But if you have Reed Newman and Rashawn Jones as shooters spreading the floor for him, you have a guy who's committed to just doing the dirty work, like Michael Downing. And then, you can get any contributions from, if Tyler Murray comes, he's a really good player, D2 player, or like Joey Holmes, another high IQ guy. And I think Tyler Benjamin as well. I forgot to mention him, but another great 3-point shooting threat for them. So they spread the floor. They have all the shooting that New Human doesn't. And I just trust the three ball going into that one. I know the front court is going to pose problems for them with Obiora and Suarez, but I think that the social has enough to pull through, and I got them advancing on. So let's just assume here, this is where it gets kind of tough to predict because we don't know what's going to happen with that Team United versus Nighthawks matchup. But let's just say things stand as they are now, and it ends up being Team United versus Social and Nighthawks versus Top Geekers. Nighthawks Top Geekers would probably have been my championship pick. And we still may see that if Nighthawks can win out tomorrow. But assuming that they meet in the semifinals, they have played twice this session. So we saw them play in week 3. Top Geekers came out on top by 10. Then we saw them play in week 6, and Nighthawks came out on top by 2. So to take a look at Nighthawks, a little bit about them. So captained by Rudy Jean. So he returns as a captain. He won with the captain of Top Geekers, Aaron Calixte. Then Aaron Calixte actually took his captain spot, proceeded to trade Rudy the following season. And now here we go with a nice storyline heading into potentially heading into the semifinals. Or championship. I do think that they're going to meet, whether it's semifinals or championship. But you've got those two getting ready to square off. But it's Rudy Jean. He's got Shane Coleman, the championship game. Shane, you might call him, hit about 9 or 10 threes in the winter championship. Went absolutely berserk. And it's just another. You got the two best big body left-handed scorers in the league in Rudy Jean and Shane Coleman. But the guy who really makes the offense go is the young boy for them, which is Winston Legentus. So he's maybe 18. We're not checking birth certificates, but that's what he put on the sign-up sheet. So we're gonna roll with that. But he's young. He's young. Don't even think that he's graduated high school yet. He's in prep school. But man, can that boy go? And I think Calixte would be the first to admit that he's going to give him all that he can handle when it comes to that matchup, and likely has the first 2 times that they played. So when you just look at that backcourt there of Legentus, Coleman, and Jean, and then you've got really good role players. Guy who surprised me most this session from that team, because I kind of had a clue that Legentus was going to go, but is Osa Iriwen. And he's played sporadic games in previous sessions, and has a load of potential. He's 6'6", he's long, he's got a good shooting stroke. He can finish at the glass, but I think it's the IQ piece of it that in previous times, and again, it's been isolated instances that I've seen him play, has not consistently been there. And again, don't take that as me saying, oh, he's a dumb player. That's not at all what I'm saying here, but just knowing where to be and at the right time on both sides of the ball has not consistently been there for him. This session, I have actually noticed that at least more consistently. I'm not going to sit here and say I've watched every minute of all of their games, but he's had a couple, player of the week performances. He's really been an X factor for a team that doesn't have the deepest front court. And that's where, that's where they're going to, I think, struggle with Top Geekers, is that, their front court, I believe Ian Kilpatrick is who starts at the 5, and Ian is a fine role player. He's not going to be able to do anything with Kwame Lee. I think he would tell you that as well. So it's going to have to be a gang effort of guarding Kwame Lee, because you just don't have anybody. Iriwen has been a scrappy defender thus far this season. He just doesn't have enough bulk to bang down there with Kwame. And then Ian just doesn't have enough height. So Ian's about 6'2", 6'3". Kwame's 6'9", right? So he just turn over the top and shoot over him. and I think he's probably a little bit too big to muscle with Ian, even though I know Ian does run a weightlifting company. But Kwame Lee's 6'9", probably 250, 260 at least, I would think, if not heavier than that. So that's tough, because then that means, the only way for you guys to defend him is you're going to have to gang up on him. So you're going to have to throw extra bodies at him. And when you have shooters like Aaron Calixte and KK Dos Santos Leal and Mike Resnick on the floor, that's not really the team. And then off the bench, they've got Kevin Bui and Andrew Valley, who, those are my guys. And I think that they have a perfect fit with this Top Geekers team. So I don't say this next part, to demean them, but that's all they're out there on the court to do, is to shoot threes. So you've got all these floor spacers. So you got to pick your poison. Are you going to leave those shooters open? Because Kwame will find them. Or are you going to try to guard Kwame one-on-one? And I think either one of those leads to a Top Geekers win. So I see Top Geekers getting on to the championship. I'll make the next one a little bit quicker. We go on to Team United and Soul Social. This is a tough one to project. So Team United, again, right now, they're on top in the standings. Their core for right now is Ozzy Trail, is Zach Turcotte, and Ozzy Trail is their captain. Speedy point guard, is having a great season. Zach Turcotte, 6'8" big. So somebody who you could, throw at Kwame Lee and should be able to disrupt him as good as anybody else in the league right now, other than maybe Arinze Obiora. And then you've got, Jordan Doffin, Devin Mayo, some, high caliber role players out there for Team United. But the key here for Team United is going to be, will Curtis Cobb show up? Because he's only done so for 2 games out of 7 so far this summer. Not sure if he's dealing with injury or if it's a lack of commitment. We would obviously love to see Curtis play more. He's one of the best scorers in the division, but just hasn't been there. If he's there, that changes things. He's not been there, over twice as much as he's been there. So I'm going to assume that he's not there for that matchup. And if that's the case, even if he is there, I might still take Soul Social. I know I'm very high on them, but I just think, Precious Oko is going to go for a run to cement himself as MVP. That's, I don't know if that's a hot take or just a warm take, but he's been doing whatever he wants pretty much on the court, as long as it doesn't come at the expense of offensive fluidity. And I know at times his captain, his teammates, I should say, are going to feel a little bit iced out. But when you got a guy who can just get 30 at will and who can do it from 3 just as good as he can do it at the basket, you got to let that guy rock. And so as long as he's looking and conscious of the caliber of shooters that are around him in Reed Newman and in Rashawn Jones, and then Tyler Benjamin as well, and Tyler Murray, if he shows up, if he can get those guys incorporated in the offense, I honestly see Soul Social as a 5 seed moving on to the championship game to set us up for a matchup between Precious Oko and Aaron Calixte. I think, with no disrespect to your Winston Legentus and your Shandon Brown and your Ozzy Trail. I think those are the 2 best point guards in the division, pound for pound. So you'll get to see those 2 match up in the championship against each other. Both teams have tremendous shooting. Both teams obviously have, MVP caliber, lead guards that can go. So the difference comes down to, can Michael Downing and Rashawn Jones or anybody else on that squad, can they guard Kwame Lee? And that's the difference maker. And I just think Kwame Lee is going to be too much to handle there in the post for them. So probably not a popular take. Nobody wants to see, other than Top Geekers and their fan base, nobody wants to see a repeat or the forming of a dynasty. But I think we have one there because that core is just so strong. So that's the pick there. Not probably a surprise for most, but I got Top Geekers over Soul Social in a high octane championship bout. So that brings us here to our legacy division. Now, legacy is the cream of the crop when it comes to BYL. Never anticipated it being that, but specifically legacy South, right? There's no division at either location that is more committed, that brings out more fans than Legacy does, right? We got elite guys that consistently ask to go down to Legacy just so that they can play in front of bigger crowds, because the Legacy guys just take it seriously. You don't have forfeits over there in Legacy. You don't have nearly as many guys that are just backing out on their commitment and not showing up. Legacy, props to you guys in Legacy South. You take it very seriously. Everybody shows up, and we're expecting another great playoff run here. So we'll move a little bit quicker through each one of these. Won't do as in depth of a breakdown, but 1 through 8, you've got programming on top, sitting in there at the 1 seed. They finished the season 6-1. So did Sub-Zero, and they are the 2 seed. So it's just a few points differential between those two that separated them. You've got OTM in your 3 seed, your reigning champion Enforcers as the 4 seed, Renegades as the 5 seed, your reigning runner-up Flight School as your 6th seed, and then we've got Mambas and Mustangs at the 7 and 8 spots. So we'll start with the 1-8 matchup, and we'll just make this pretty quick. I don't see programming losing this one. Mustangs won our winter championship. They have been, one of our most storied franchises. They've been around almost since the beginning. Started off with Commissioner Kenny Seitz as the captain. He passed on the reins to Ian Hare. Ian took his lumps for a while, but then drafted a stellar team in the winter that went on to win the championship. But this team that he has this session has just not clicked the way that his past few teams have. He does have Kevin Perry with him. They finally got to connect with MJ Cardoso, and they've got big man Carl Oxias and some others on the roster. But programming is an offensive machine right now. They play efficient basketball. They've got a plus 94 point differential on the season. And again, only that one loss that came, when did it come? Let's see. So they lost, I believe it was week 4 in a fluky matchup against Showstoppers, who, as you see, did not even qualify here for the playoffs. So not going to put a lot of stock in that. You take that game out, which my guess would be Jude Valmuse was not there for, who's their leading scorer. Maybe their leading scorer. Noel Vargas has been really hot this session, but take that out, and they haven't lost a game of meaning here this season. So, like I said, Noel Vargas has been playing, at least to start the season, his best basketball, at least his best basketball in a very long time. You've got Jude Valmuse, who is a perennial all-league performer. Alan St. Cyrin, who's a big man. And Chris Taglieri, actually, of late, has been on fire as well. So you think about that backcourt, and Jose Abreu, you've got 4 guards at all times, really good shooters, and 3 of those 4 in Vargas and Valmuse and Taglieri. And then you've got, sort of your floor general style point guard, Jose Alvarado type, and Jose Abreu, who's a really pesky defender, really savvy passer, and really pushes the tempo. So they spread you out. They get going in a hurry in the fast break, and just when you thought you've caught up to them, they have a shooter who's trailing the action. So that team is very good, very well balanced. I see them moving on. I don't see them running into many problems with the Mustangs. I just don't think that they can match up. So that means, who are they going to play in the semifinals? So this is a tough one to call. Enforcers, again, your reigning champions, took the league by storm last session, went on a playoff run to remember, and won it in the championship. They bring back, Captain Nick Bertrand, Jerome Overstreet, who would have been your finals MVP if we awarded that. They reunite with Malik Ibrahim, who makes his return to BYL this summer. And they've got Tafari Kid and Jaden Few. So, with those last 3 there, you might look at it and say, how the volatility, with that combination of few Malik and Kid, in the same backcourt to balance out Bertrand and Overstreet in the front court. And they've had their ups and downs this season, but when we look at what they've done lately, they going back to week 6, they were able to beat Showstoppers. Then last week they decisively beat Flight School, and they had a tough loss right before that, but they've won 2 of their last 3. They come into this one with a Renegades team that started off the season really hot, has since sputtered out a little bit, but they've got a lot of offensive firepower there between Cam Moniz, Alan Abuna, Evan Bean, Matthew Vega, and then some new guys that have come. So this is a really tough one to call. And this might be a cop-out answer, but I'm going to go with the group that has done it before, which is the Enforcers. So even though they add in some new pieces there, Bertrand, Overstreet, and Jaden Few all did it together last session. I think they know how to keep their composure in a close game. I also don't think that the Renegades really have a body to bang with Jerome Overstreet. So as long as he comes out ready to play and realizes that he's 6'4", I'm not going to guess on his weight, but he's 6'4" and at least 60 pounds heavier than anybody over on his opponent. And athletically too, that's the thing with Jerome that is deceptive. He's a really good athlete out there. He moves really well for somebody of his size and stature. So he should be able to impose his will on both ends of the ball because he's a great shot blocker. But then also just put it up on the glass, and if you miss, then go get it. I know Alan Abuna is a tremendous rebounder, but he can't muscle with Jerome Overstreet. So Jerome should be able to have his will in the paint, and that'll just open up everything for Tafari, for Jaden, for Malik, and then they can find Nick, who I think he's at his best when he's stretching the floor, playing sort of like that Ryan Anderson stretch 4 role. If you think about the former stretch 4 from the Orlando Magic, so I see the Enforcers moving on just based off of experience and roster cohesion there. Going to the other side of the bracket, we've got Sub-Zero, who some will say I'm a little bit biased towards, but this is actually probably our most storied playoff matchup or playoff rivalry is Sub-Zero and Mambas. This has to be at least like the 5th or 6th time that these two teams have faced off in the playoffs. And it usually doesn't end well for Sub-Zero unless it's a championship game. So they faced off twice in the championship. Sub-Zero has come out on top in both of those games. But any time that these two teams play in the quarterfinals or semifinals, I think it's actually just the quarterfinals, Mambas has found a way to win. So they eked out a close one last week against Brotherhood, that being the Mambas. They're led by Captain Nate Stratton. He reunited with Darius Zahedi and Angel LeBron from that team last summer that went to the championship. Also have Mark Georges and Kyle Murphy on the squad. And Christian Arthur has actually been putting in some really big minutes for them as well. So they're the type of team, if they're going to win this game, it's going to be because they are able to spread Sub-Zero out, and they're able to get pull Hollis Portis and Mike Ward out into mismatches, probably on Angel LeBron. I think Angel LeBron has to go for about 30 in a game like this. Either he or Darius Zahedi, but I would venture to say that it would more likely be Angel LeBron that has that type of a game, just because of the different ways that he can score and the athletic advantage that he has out there on the court. But with that being said, Sub-Zero is just about as well-oiled a machine as you're going to find in Legacy this summer. They only lost one game as well. I think that was early on in the season against OTM. That might have been actually week 1, right? Yeah, it was week 1. They lost a 3-point game against OTM, who is the next seeded team, is no slouch. And then since then, they've rattled off 6 straight wins, and many of them decisively because they have a plus 87-point differential. So Captain Micah Duarte has surrounded himself. He's got his anchor in the paint with Mike Ward, who he's combined with Hollis Portis. So between those two, different style of big men, but you've got two of probably the best, 4 or 5 big men in the division. And both are big men that are versatile. I think, Portis is less of a shooter and more of a slasher. So, he can, he can face you up and just blow by you because he's in incredible shape. For his 6'4" frame. And then you've got Ward, who's also probably about 6'4", is definitely a more beefy 6'4", but has every move imaginable in the book as far as his post game, but then can also step out and shoot the 3 ball at a 40% clip. Then he was able to go in the second round and get Zach Latifi, who's fresh off of a 5-year collegiate career at Regis College, and played in our collegiate division the past 2 summers, is a sniper of a shooter, isn't a natural point guard, but has enough IQ and skills, especially in the legacy division, to play that position, which is what he's done this session, and too much success. Again, they're 6-1. You look at the rest of the roster, they've got guys who just know what their role is and are happy to do it. You've got a Jake Tulloch, who is a defensive stopper, and can run the offense for spurts. You've got Mike Frizzell, who's a knockdown shooter, maybe one of a top 3 knockdown shooter in the legacy division. You've got Dan Dagnchu and Matt Owens as well, who make their contributions. So I just think that there's too much there. When you look at Mambas, especially in the front court, Nate Stratton is their biggest body. He's really their only body that's capable of consistently defending post players. And even that, I don't think that's his forte. So, he's not going to go out there and stop Mike Ward from doing what he wants to do, nor would he stop Hollis Portis. I think Hollis Portis is too swift of foot for that. So that advantage alone has me thinking that Sub-Zero is going to move on. You look at the 3-6 matchup, that one's a little bit tighter of a call to make because you've got OTM and you've got Flight School. So I think those are the previous 2 runner-ups, if I recall correctly, would be those 2 squads here. Now, as far as if they have matched up, I don't believe that they have this season, to be honest. We'll do a quick look at the schedule, but they haven't matched up. OTM finished the season 5-2, so they were 1 loss short from getting one of these top 2 seeds. And one of those losses was a triple overtime game against the Brotherhood, so they very easily could have been 6-1 and would have had the tiebreaker over Sub-Zero. And then Flight School has been up and down season for them. They're 3-4. So breaking down OTM first, their roster, Nick Loriano obviously is the headliner. He's the captain. He's the top scorer for the squad. But he's got a first-time big man. I hesitate to call him a rookie because guy's probably in his 30s. But we've got Moliere Molin. He is a big man. Is very high IQ from what I've seen, is able to score in the post, isn't going to play beyond his means though, keeps it simple, doesn't have to do 4 moves if he can just do 1 in order to score. Haven't seen him necessarily step out and shoot it too often. I'm not saying that he can't do that, I just haven't seen it, but that's him. He's a bruiser down there. And then you've got really strong guard play the rest of the way through. So you've got Mission Vieira, you've got Deshaun Jean Lewis, you've got Josh Santos and Julian Few, all as guards out there on the perimeter that provide a lot of matchup or mismatches is what I'm trying to say for the opponents. And you've got Bill Pierre, who helps out on the board. So it's not all on Moliere to handle the paint. I mean, pound for pound, there might not be a better rebounder in the legacy division than Bill Pierre, even though at first glance, if you look at him, sort of slight of stature type of guy under 6 foot, you wouldn't think that. But, if, on a per 40-minute basis, he has to average, 12, 13 rebounds. And especially on the offensive glass, he's just a killer. So they're a really strong squad and definitely a contender. If you're going to go outside of programming at Sub-Zero to look for a champion, that's probably a place that you look first. But they're going up against a Flight School team who can get hot in a hurry. So they're captained by Ali Tren, but then they've got Bipin Tamang and Marcin Papla, who are 2 of the best 3-point shooters that you're going to find in the legacy division. They've also got Sung Dam, who can push the tempo and give you a little bit different of a look as a guy in the fast break for them. And then big men wise, they've got Wally Callum and they've got Charles Cook. So, they're really well rounded. I think they're a little bit better than a 3-4 team. This might be the first round matchup that I'm most excited for, is seeing these two teams get ready to square off. Because I think if Flight School can, I mean, they don't have to even throw another body at Moliere, to be honest. He's much bigger than Wally Callum, but Wally's so long and such a good shot blocker that he could definitely disrupt what he does. And if not, you just throw Charles Cook at him. And if you want to save Wally and reserve him to go get jump balls against Bill Pierre, or use his length on one of these perimeter guys who probably not Nick Loriano. Excuse me, probably not Nick Loriano. I wouldn't recommend having Wally guard him. I think that's Ali's matchup for the night. But yeah, I just, their ability to spread the ball and to shoot the three ball should be worrisome for OTM. Their whole defensive strategy has to be about, do not let them beat us from three. We've got to get out. We've got to close out on three, and we've got to run these guys off the, off the 3-point line and into the paint. Bippen can score down there, but you're probably not going to see too much of any of the other guys scoring over Moliere in Bill in the paint consistently. So for OTM, if they can keep these guys off the 3-point line and from getting hot out there, they should move on, and I think that they will. But just know, it shouldn't be a surprise if Flight School gets hot and runs away with that one, because they can get hot. I'm looking up and down the board, and if I had to choose a team that I'm most scared of from the three ball, it's probably them. So OTM, I think, advances. So, sort of a chalk, going chalk here, where we've got our top 4 seeds advancing. Looking at that potential semifinals matchup, programming and enforcers, we'll keep it sweet and simple. I see programming moving on without much resistance there, even with Jerome Overstreet going into a matchup where he should be able to truly do damage. I just don't see I think Jude Valmuse, Noel Vargas and Chris Taglieri, that combo, along with Jose Abreu, they're so versatile on both sides of the ball that I think ultimately they will that team to a win. And I see programming moving on to the championship. I think it's going to be a rematch of a past championship that we had, programming and Sub-Zero, because I do see Sub-Zero moving on as well against OTM in that rematch. I know OTM got the better of them the last time, but no team's been hotter than Sub-Zero the rest of the season. They're on a 6-game winning streak. Now you might say, hey, they're due for one, but I think that their combination of Portis and Ward in the front court, mixed with Zach Latifi and the rest of the great role players that they have out there, is going to be too much for OTM to handle. Which brings us to the championship matchup, where you're going to see programming, which has some of the best guard play in the league, versus Sub-Zero, which has one of the best front courts in the league, face off against each other. This one pains me. Sub-Zero is my alma mater, my former team. Programming, has probably my best friend in Jude Valmuse and former championship teammate out there going up against each other. So, all biases aside, I have to think that I typically, in these matchups, I go with guard play. And I think that defensively, programming is a little bit too versatile for Sub-Zero to handle, even with the front court advantages that they possess. Jude Valmuse, to be honest, he can guard either of those big guys if you need him to, but I believe Alan St. Cyr will be able to as well. And then Jose Abreu is one of the best on-ball defenders that you have out there in the league. Noel Vargas is no slouch on the defensive side of the ball either. So I think that they'll be able to put so much pressure on Sub-Zero's limited ball handlers, and slow down their front court enough. And then Sub-Zero, they're no slouches defensively, but do they have the type of athletes for 40 minutes to keep Valmuse and Vargas and Taglieri and Abreu from going off. And I don't know that they do. I'll tell you this, it'll be a very close contest, but ultimately I do see programming advancing on to the championship for the Legacy Division this summer. So that has been our summer 2024 BYL South playoff preview. Action tips off tonight at 7 o'clock p.m. And we hope to see you out there at the Dana Barros Basketball Club. But a reminder for everybody, whether you live in the South or whether you live in the North Shore or whether you're in Central Mass, or as announced yesterday or 2 days ago, whether you're in now Connecticut, registration is open for all four of our divisions. Dana Barros Basketball Club in the South, Apex Athletics in the North, Four Kicks coming this fall in Marlborough, Mass, and then the Co-op Vale Sports Center in Berlin, Connecticut. So make sure that you guys sign up while spots are still available. We will sell out all of those locations. We have every single summer that we've been in existence. So make sure that you take the 60 to 90 seconds that it takes to fill out that registration form. Do so today. If you need to wait a couple of weeks to make a payment, you have time to do that. But fill out that form now, because that's what gets you in line. Because we will run out of those spots eventually, and there's just no sense in taking that risk. You don't get your name in on time, then you got to sit until January. That's a long way off, right? Go ahead and register today. Get your spot. We hope to see you out on the court.